The morning sun cast long shadows across the Henderson farm as Sarah May wiped the sweat from her forehead with the back of her dirt-stained hand. At 23, she had calluses that told stories of early mornings milking cows, afternoons mending fences, and evenings hauling hay bales that weighed nearly as much as she did. Her twin sister Emma Rose had never developed such hands. Emma Rose had always been the pretty one, the one who kept her nails painted and her hair styled, even in the humidity of rural Tennessee. The twins looked identical from a distance, but, up close, the differences were stark. While Emma Rose spent her mornings applying makeup and choosing outfits, Sarah May was already 3 hours into her daily chores. While Emma Rose practiced piano for the church social, Sarah May was teaching herself tactical combat training from military manuals she ordered online with money earned from selling eggs at the farmer's market. Their father, Jim Henderson, had always favored Emma Rose. It wasn't something he tried to hide. At family dinners, he would beam with pride when Emma Rose talked about her plans to marry well and move to Nashville. When Sarah May mentioned her interest in joining the military, he would change the subject or make jokes about girls playing soldier. Their mother, God rest her soul, had been the only one who saw something special in Sarah May's determination. She had died when the twins were 16, taking with her the only voice that ever encouraged Sarah May's unconventional dreams. The morning everything changed started like any other. Sarah May was in the barn, repairing a broken stall door that had been splintered by their temperamental stallion, when she heard car doors slamming in the driveway. Through the dusty window, she could see a black sedan with government plates. 2 men in military uniforms were walking toward the house, their faces grave and purposeful. Her heart stopped. Military officials only came to farms like theirs for one reason, and it wasn't good news. But they weren't at war, and neither she nor Emma Rose had any military connections. The confusion was quickly replaced by dread as she watched her father emerge from the house, followed by Emma Rose, who was wrapping a silk robe around her nightgown despite it being nearly noon. Sarah May dropped her hammer and ran toward the house, her work boots thudding against the packed earth. She could hear voices before she reached the porch, her father's defensive tone mixing with Emma Rose's high-pitched protests. "There must be some mistake," Emma Rose was saying, her voice trembling. "I never signed up for anything. I never even took those tests." One of the military men, a colonel with silver hair and sharp eyes, was holding a thick folder. "Miss Henderson, according to our records, you scored the highest in your class on the military aptitude assessment. Your psychological profile indicates exceptional leadership potential, and your physical fitness scores were off the charts." Sarah May felt her stomach drop. She had taken those tests. 2 years ago, when a military recruiter had visited their high school, she had signed up under Emma Rose's name because their father had forbidden her from having any contact with military personnel. Emma Rose had been homesick with the flu that day, and Sarah May had seen it as her only chance to prove herself. "I think there's been a confusion," Sarah May said, stepping onto the porch. All eyes turned to her, and she felt suddenly small under their scrutiny. Her work clothes were stained with mud and motor oil, her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she probably smelled like the barn. Next to Emma Rose, who looked like a delicate flower even in her nightclothes, Sarah May felt like exactly what she was, a farm girl who had never belonged anywhere else. The colonel's eyes moved between the twins, clearly trying to process the identical faces but completely different presentations. "Which one of you is Emma Rose Henderson?" Emma Rose stepped forward, lifting her chin in a way that made her look every inch the Southern belle she had always aspired to be. "I am, but I'm telling you, there's been a mistake. I never took any military tests. I'm planning to marry my fiancé Bradley next summer and move to his family's estate in Nashville. I have no interest in the military." The colonel frowned and looked down at his papers. "The tests were taken on October 15, 2 years ago, at Franklin County High School. Are you saying you weren't present that day?" "I was homesick," Emma Rose said quickly. "I had the flu." Sarah May felt her father's eyes boring into her. Jim Henderson was not a stupid man, and she could see the moment he put the pieces together. His face turned red, the way it always did when he was about to lose his temper. "Sarah May," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "What did you do?" Before Sarah May could answer, the second military man, a younger captain with kind eyes, spoke up. "Sir, if there was some kind of identity mix-up, we'll need to sort this out. These test scores and evaluations are extraordinary. Whoever took these tests has the potential to be one of the most effective special operations soldiers we've ever seen." Emma Rose let out a nervous laugh. "Well, that certainly wasn't me. I've never even held a gun." All eyes turned to Sarah May, who felt like a deer caught in headlights. Her father's anger was radiating off him in waves. Emma Rose looked confused and slightly amused, and the military men were clearly trying to understand what had happened. "I took the tests," Sarah May said quietly. "I used Emma Rose's name because Daddy said I wasn't allowed to talk to recruiters." The silence that followed was deafening. Her father's face went from red to purple, and Emma Rose's mouth fell open in shock. "You did what?" Jim Henderson's voice was barely controlled. "I wanted to serve," Sarah May said, finding her voice and her courage. "I wanted to prove that I could be something more than just a farmhand. I've been preparing for years, training myself, studying military strategy and tactics. I know I don't look like much, but I'm strong and I'm smart and I'm willing to work harder than anyone." The colonel was studying her now with new interest. "You've been training yourself?" Sarah May nodded. "Physical fitness, weapons maintenance, tactical planning, survival skills. I've read every military manual I could get my hands on. I've been running 10 miles every morning for 3 years and doing calisthenics in the barn every night." "Show us," the captain said suddenly. "What?" Sarah May blinked in surprise. "Show us what you can do. If you really scored those test results, prove it." Jim Henderson stepped forward. "Now hold on just a minute. Sarah May has chores to do. She doesn't have time for this nonsense." But the colonel held up a hand. "Mr. Henderson, with respect, if your daughter has the abilities these test scores suggest, she could serve her country in ways that very few people ever can. The scores indicate potential for special operations, possibly even elite units." Emma Rose looked back and forth between Sarah May and the military men. "Special operations? Like the Navy SEALs?" "Among other possibilities," the colonel said. "These scores suggest someone with exceptional mental toughness, strategic thinking, and physical capabilities. If they're accurate." Sarah May felt something stirring in her chest that she had never felt before. Hope. Real, tangible hope that maybe, just maybe, she could escape the life that had been chosen for her before she was born. "What kind of test?" she asked. The captain smiled. "Nothing too complicated. Some basic physical assessments, maybe a few tactical scenarios. Think of it as a preliminary evaluation." Her father stepped between them. "Absolutely not. Sarah May has responsibilities here. She's not going anywhere." But, for the first time in her life, Sarah May stood up to her father. "Daddy, I'm 23 years old. I can make my own decisions. Not while you live under my roof, you can't." The colonel cleared his throat. "Mr. Henderson, if your daughter is truly as capable as these test scores suggest, she could be earning a substantial military salary within a year. Special operations soldiers receive significant compensation, plus benefits that could help your family considerably." Jim Henderson's anger faltered for just a moment. The farm had been struggling financially for years, and everyone knew it. The bank had already come by twice about the mortgage, and they'd had to sell their best breeding cattle just to make ends meet. Sarah May saw the opening and took it. "Daddy, let me try. If I fail, I'll come home and never mention the military again. But if I succeed, think about what it could mean. For the farm, for our family." Emma Rose, who had been quietly watching the exchange, suddenly spoke up. "Let her do it, Daddy. If she wants to play soldier so badly, let her. When she washes out, maybe she'll finally accept her place here." The word stung, but Sarah May didn't let them show on her face. She had grown used to Emma Rose's casual cruelty over the years, the way her twin could dismiss her dreams with a laugh and a wave of her perfectly manicured hand. The colonel looked around the group. "We could conduct some preliminary assessments right here, if you'd prefer. Nothing that would require leaving the property." Jim Henderson looked torn. Finally, he nodded curtly. "Fine. But, when this is over, I don't want to hear another word about the military." What followed was unlike anything Sarah May had ever experienced. The captain produced a stopwatch and had her run a measured course around the property. She completed the 2-mile circuit in under 12 minutes, barely breathing hard. Then, he had her do push-ups, sit-ups, and pull-ups using the barn equipment. She performed well beyond the standards for military fitness, let alone the standards for women. But, the physical tests were just the beginning. The colonel presented her with a series of tactical scenarios, asking her how she would approach various military situations. Her answers showed not just knowledge of military doctrine, but creative thinking and strategic innovation that impressed even the seasoned officers. "Where did you learn this?" the colonel asked after she had outlined a complex hostage rescue scenario that incorporated elements from 3 different special operations manuals. "Books, mostly," Sarah May said. "And I watch a lot of military documentaries. I've been studying this stuff since I was 16. Emma Rose rolled her eyes. "She spends all her free time reading those boring books. I always told her she should focus on finding a husband instead." The captain ignored Emma Rose and continued questioning Sarah May about everything from foreign languages. She had taught herself basic Arabic and Mandarin, to weapons systems. She could field strip and reassemble any rifle used by the U.S. military, despite never having touched a real one. By the end of the afternoon, the 2 military men were exchanging looks that Sarah May couldn't quite interpret. They stepped away from the group and had a hushed conversation that lasted several minutes. When they returned, the colonel's expression was serious. "Miss Henderson, we'd like to offer you an opportunity to attend a special assessment program. It's a 3-week intensive course that would determine whether you're suitable for advanced military training." Sarah May's heart leaped, but, before she could respond, her father cut in. 3 weeks? She can't be gone for 3 weeks. We have a farm to run. The program includes compensation for the family to cover any lost labor, the captain said smoothly. And, if she qualifies for advanced training, there would be additional financial benefits. Emma Rose looked intrigued for the first time. "How much compensation?" When the colonel named a figure, Jim Henderson's objections died in his throat. It was more money than the farm made in a good year. Sarah May felt like she was in a dream. "What kind of advanced training?" "That would depend on your performance in the assessment program," the colonel said. "But, based on what we've seen today, you could be looking at opportunities in special reconnaissance, direct action, or even counter-terrorism operations." The words sounded like magic to Sarah May's ears. For years, she had dreamed of being part of something bigger than herself, something that mattered. She had watched documentaries about military heroes and read biographies of female soldiers who had broken barriers and saved lives. She had never imagined that she, a country girl from Tennessee who smelled like hay and motor oil, could be one of them. "When would this assessment program start?" she asked. 2 weeks from today. You'd need to report to a training facility in Georgia." Sarah May looked at her father, whose expression was unreadable. Then, she looked at Emma Rose, who was examining her nails with studied disinterest. Finally, she looked back at the 2 military men who were offering her everything she had ever wanted. "I'll do it," she said. The words felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. She knew that once she left the farm, nothing would ever be the same. But, she also knew that if she didn't take this chance, she would spend the rest of her life wondering what might have been. As the military men prepared to leave, the colonel handed her a packet of information. "Study these materials. The assessment program is designed to push candidates to their absolute limits. Many don't make it through the first week." "I'll make it," Sarah May said with quiet confidence. The colonel smiled. "I believe you will." After the military car disappeared down the dusty road, the family stood in awkward silence on the porch. Finally, Jim Henderson turned to Sarah May with an expression she couldn't read. "You better not embarrass this family," he said. "If you're going to do this fool thing, you better succeed." Emma Rose laughed. "Oh, she'll be back in a week, crying and ready to settle down like she should have done years ago." But, as Sarah May looked out at the fields where she had spent her entire life, she felt something she had never experienced before: absolute certainty. She was going to succeed at this assessment program, and she was going to prove to everyone, including herself, that a country girl could be anything she set her mind to be. That night, she stayed up reading the materials the Colonel had given her. They outlined physical fitness standards that were beyond anything she had ever attempted, mental challenges that would test her problem-solving abilities under extreme stress, and psychological evaluations designed to identify the kind of mental toughness required for special operations. As she read, Sarah May began to understand that this assessment program wasn't just about joining the military. It was about joining an elite group of soldiers who operated in the shadows, who took on missions that regular military units couldn't handle. These were the people who rescued hostages, eliminated terrorist threats, and conducted operations so secret that their families never knew where they were or what they were doing. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, Sarah May felt more alive than she had in years. She was finally going to have the chance to prove that she was more than just a farm girl. She was going to show the world, and herself, exactly what she was capable of. 2 weeks later, as she packed her single duffel bag with the few possessions she owned, Emma Rose watched from the doorway of their shared bedroom. "You know you're making a mistake," Emma Rose said. "Bradley's cousin Marcus is looking for a wife. He has a good job at the bank and a nice house in town. You could have a normal life." Sarah May folded her military manuals carefully between her clothes. "I don't want a normal life, Emma Rose. I want an extraordinary one. You're going to get yourself killed playing soldier." Sarah May looked at her twin sister, seeing not malice but genuine confusion. Emma Rose truly couldn't understand why anyone would choose hardship and danger over comfort and security. They were identical in appearance, but they might as well have been different species when it came to their dreams and ambitions. "Maybe," Sarah May said. "But at least I'll die trying to be something more than what everyone expects me to be." The next morning, Jim Henderson drove her to the bus station in town. The ride was silent except for the radio playing country music and the sound of gravel under the truck tires. When they reached the station, he helped her unload her bag from the truck bed. "Sarah May," he said as she prepared to board the bus, "I still think you're making a mistake. But, if you're determined to do this thing, then do it right. Don't come home a failure." It wasn't the send-off she had hoped for, but it was more encouragement than he had ever given her before. She hugged him quickly and climbed onto the bus, finding a seat by the window. As the bus pulled away from Franklin County, Sarah May watched the familiar landscape of her childhood disappear behind her. Rolling hills covered in tobacco and corn, farmhouses with wraparound porches, churches with white steeples pointing toward heaven. It was beautiful in its own way, but it had never been enough for her. She was heading toward something unknown and potentially dangerous, leaving behind everything and everyone she had ever known. But, for the first time in her life, she felt like she was moving in the right direction. The girl who had spent her whole life being told she was the wrong twin, the one who would never amount to anything special, was about to discover just how wrong everyone had been about her. Sarah May Henderson was going to become someone that no one, not even she herself, could have imagined. The assessment program was waiting, and, with it, the chance to transform herself from a country girl into something far more dangerous and capable than anyone had ever suspected possible. The military transport bus that picked Sarah May up from the civilian station looked like it had seen better decades. Gray paint peeled from its sides, and the windows were tinted so dark she couldn't see inside. When the doors opened with a mechanical wheeze, she found herself face to face with a driver who looked like he could bench press the entire vehicle. "Henderson?" His voice sounded like gravel in a cement mixer. "Yes, sir." "Get on. Keep your mouth shut until we reach the facility." Sarah May climbed aboard to find 12 other candidates already seated. Most were men, ranging in age from what looked like early 20s to late 30s. A few women were scattered among them, all looking considerably more polished and urban than Sarah May felt in her simple jeans and flannel shirt. The bus ride took 4 hours through increasingly desolate Georgia countryside. No one spoke, following the driver's directive, but Sarah May could feel the other candidates sizing each other up. She caught fragments of whispered conversations when the driver wasn't paying attention. College graduates, former athletes, military academy dropouts who were trying to get back in. One woman mentioned having a master's degree in international relations. Sarah May suddenly felt very small and very out of place. These people had credentials and education and city polish. What did she have? Calloused hands and a head full of military knowledge gleaned from library books and internet forums. The facility, when they finally reached it, looked nothing like the military bases she had seen in movies. No flagpoles or parade grounds or neat rows of barracks. Instead, it was a collection of low, windowless concrete buildings surrounded by razor wire and dense forest. A sign by the gate simply read Training Facility 7, authorized personnel only. They were processed through a security checkpoint that involved more paperwork and background verification than Sarah May had expected. Her fingerprints were taken, photographs from multiple angles, and she was required to surrender all personal belongings except for basic toiletries and one change of clothes. Everything else will be provided, explained a stern-faced woman in military fatigues who introduced herself only as Instructor Walsh. You will receive your gear assignments after initial medical clearance. The medical examination was unlike anything Sarah May had experienced at her local doctor's office. Blood draws, stress tests, psychological evaluations, and physical assessments that pushed her body to its limits. The medical staff was efficient but impersonal, treating the candidates like livestock being evaluated for breeding stock. When she finally reached her assigned dormitory room at nearly midnight, Sarah May was exhausted but too keyed up to sleep. The room was Spartan, 2 metal bunk beds for lockers, and a single window that looked out onto the forest. Her 3 roommates were already there, unpacking the military issue gear that had been waiting on their beds. "I'm Jessica," said a tall blonde woman who looked like she had stepped off a magazine cover. "Former Division I swimmer at Stanford." "You?" "Sarah May Henderson." "I'm from Tennessee." "College?" asked another roommate, a compact woman with short dark hair and arms that suggested serious weight training. "No college. I worked on my family's farm." The silence that followed was not encouraging. Jessica and the other women exchanged glances that spoke volumes about their assessment of Sarah May's qualifications. The third roommate, who had been quietly arranging her belongings, looked up from her locker. "I'm Maria Santos. Former Marine, did 2 tours in Afghanistan before I got out to finish my degree. What made you think you could handle this program?" It was clearly a challenge, delivered in a tone that suggested Maria had already written Sarah May off as dead weight. "I guess we'll find out," Sarah May said quietly. The wake-up call came at 0400 hours, delivered by Instructor Walsh banging on metal trash can lids and shouting commands that would have made a drill sergeant proud. The candidates stumbled from their bunks and into the hallway, where they were given exactly 10 minutes to dress in the military fatigues that had been provided and report to the assembly area. Sarah May was one of the first ones ready. Years of early morning farm chores had conditioned her to wake up alert and move quickly. She noticed that several of the other candidates were still struggling with sleep deprivation and the shock of the harsh wake-up call. The assembly area was a gymnasium-sized room with no windows and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and slightly sick. Instructor Walsh was joined by 3 other instructors, all of whom looked like they could have stepped out of a special operations recruitment poster. "Welcome to Assessment Week 1, Walsh announced. Over the next 21 days, you will be evaluated on physical fitness, mental toughness, tactical thinking, leadership potential, and psychological stability. Approximately 70% of you will not complete this program." She paused to let that sink in. Those who do complete the assessment will be eligible for advanced special operations training programs that represent the pinnacle of military service. These programs have washout rates exceeding 90%. Most of you are not mentally, physically, or emotionally prepared for what lies ahead. Sarah May looked around at her fellow candidates. Several were shifting uncomfortably, and one young man near the back was visibly sweating despite the cool morning air. The first phase of evaluation begins now. You have 60 seconds to form teams of 4 for your initial tactical exercise. Choose wisely. Your team's performance will affect your individual scores. Chaos ensued as candidates began frantically trying to form alliances. Sarah May found herself standing alone as the former college athletes and military academy graduates quickly clustered together. She watched Jessica team up with 2 men who looked like they spent their free time in expensive gyms, while Maria Santos joined a group that was clearly composed of former military personnel. With 30 seconds left on the clock, Sarah May was approached by 3 candidates who, like her, appeared to have been left behind in the initial selection process. There was David, a thin man with thick glasses who looked more suited for a library than a military base. Carlos, who was obviously struggling with the physical demands based on how he was already breathing hard from the stress. And Jennifer, a quiet woman who seemed overwhelmed by the entire situation. "Looks like we're the island of misfit toys," David said with a nervous laugh. "Then, let's be the best misfit toys they've ever seen," Sarah May replied. The tactical exercise turned out to be a variation of Capture the Flag, but with complications that tested far more than just physical speed and agility. The teams were given maps of a 10-acre area of forest surrounding the facility, with multiple objectives to complete and obstacles to overcome. Sarah May's team was assigned to retrieve a package from a location deep in the woods while avoiding enemy instructors who were armed with paint guns and had the authority to eliminate candidates from the exercise. Additionally, they had to solve a series of puzzles and challenges along the way that required both individual skills and team coordination. The other teams took off into the forest with aggressive confidence, relying on their superior fitness and military experience to power through the challenges. Sarah May took a different approach. "Wait," she said as her teammates prepared to follow the other groups. "Let's think about this." She spread the map on the ground and studied it carefully. The obvious route to the objective was a straight line through relatively open terrain. It would be fast but offered little cover from the instructors hunting them. Most teams would probably choose that route. "Look here," she pointed to a winding path that followed a creek bed. "This route is longer, but it offers natural concealment. And these elevation markers suggest there are ridges that could provide overwatch positions." David adjusted his glasses and looked where she was pointing. "You're right. But it'll take twice as long." "Maybe. But if we're smart about it, we might avoid the instructors entirely while the other teams are getting picked off on the obvious routes." Jennifer, who had barely spoken since they formed the team, suddenly looked interested. "You really think we can outthink them instead of trying to outrun them?" "I think we have to," Sarah May said. "We're not the fastest or the strongest team here. But maybe we can be the smartest." What followed was unlike anything Sarah May had experienced, but it felt natural in a way that surprised her. Leading her team through the forest, she found herself thinking 3 steps ahead, anticipating problems and developing solutions on the fly. When they encountered the first puzzle, a complex rope and pulley system that required precise coordination to unlock the next clue, she organized her team's efforts with an efficiency that impressed even herself. David turned out to have an analytical mind that was perfect for solving the mathematical components of the challenges. Carlos, despite his physical limitations, had an intuitive understanding of mechanical systems that proved invaluable. Jennifer was quiet but observant, spotting details and potential threats that the others missed. As they worked their way through the forest, avoiding the main paths and using natural cover, Sarah May began to realize that her years of farm work had given her skills she hadn't even recognized. Reading terrain, moving quietly through vegetation, understanding how to use natural features for concealment and protection, all of this felt as natural as breathing. When they heard paint gunfire in the distance, indicating that other teams were being eliminated, Sarah May felt a surge of confidence. Her strategy was working. The final challenge required them to cross an open area to reach the objective while avoiding instructor patrols. Sarah May studied the pattern of the patrols for 20 minutes, timing their movements and identifying a window of opportunity that would last exactly 90 seconds. "We go in single file," she whispered to her team. "Jennifer leads because she's the quietest. Carlos, you follow her and focus on the package retrieval. David, you watch R6 and call out any problems. I'll coordinate and cover any contingencies. They executed the plan flawlessly. Jennifer moved through the open area like a shadow, Carlos grabbed the package with mechanical precision, and David's sharp eyes spotted an instructor who was deviating from the expected patrol pattern in time for them to adjust their exit route. When they emerged from the forest with the package and all team members intact, they found that they were the only team to successfully complete the exercise. Every other group had lost at least one member to the instructor patrols, and 2 teams had failed to reach the objective at all. Instructor Walsh looked genuinely surprised as she examined their package and verified their completion of all required challenges. Explain your strategy, she ordered. Sarah May stepped forward. We assessed our team's strengths and weaknesses honestly, then developed a plan that maximized our advantages while minimizing our exposure to areas where other teams were stronger. Instead of competing on their terms, we created our own terms for success. Walsh nodded slowly. Textbook special operations thinking. Unconventional approaches to achieve objectives while minimizing risk and maximizing probability of mission success. That evening, during the debrief session, Sarah May's team was held up as an example of effective tactical thinking. The praise felt good, but what felt better was the way her teammates looked at her with newfound respect. Where did you learn to think like that? David asked as they sat in the dining hall, picking at military-issue meals that tasted like cardboard. I don't know, Sarah May said honestly. It just felt natural. Like putting together a puzzle, but with real consequences. Jennifer, who was slowly coming out of her shell, leaned forward. My brother is in the Rangers. He always said that the best operators aren't necessarily the strongest or the fastest. They're the ones who can see the whole picture and find solutions that nobody else thinks of. Over the following days, the assessment program intensified dramatically. Physical fitness tests that pushed candidates to exhaustion, psychological evaluations designed to identify breaking points, and tactical exercises that became increasingly complex and demanding. Sarah May found herself thriving in ways that surprised everyone, including herself. Her farm-bred endurance served her well in the grueling physical challenges. Her self-taught military knowledge proved remarkably comprehensive and accurate. But, more importantly, she discovered a natural aptitude for leadership that emerged when she was faced with real challenges and real consequences. Not everyone was adjusting as well. 3 candidates dropped out during the first week, unable to handle the physical and psychological stress. Jessica, despite her impressive athletic background, struggled with the tactical thinking components and became increasingly frustrated with her performance. Maria Santos, the former Marine, was excelling in individual challenges but had difficulty working as part of a team, often alienating potential allies with her abrasive leadership style. Sarah May, meanwhile, was building a reputation as someone who could be counted on to find solutions when situations seemed impossible. When her team got lost during a night navigation exercise, she used farm-learned skills to read the stars and lead them to safety. When a teammate was injured during a combat simulation, she improvised medical care using techniques she had learned from treating injured livestock. But it was during the psychological evaluation sessions that Sarah May truly began to understand what the instructors were looking for. The sessions weren't just about mental stability or stress tolerance. They were about identifying candidates who possessed a rare combination of moral conviction, tactical flexibility, and emotional resilience that would allow them to operate effectively in the gray areas where special operations forces worked. Tell me about your motivation for being here, asked Dr. Reeves, the program's chief psychologist, during one of their sessions. I want to serve my country, Sarah May replied. That's what everyone says. But why really? What are you running toward, or what are you running from? Sarah May thought for a long moment. I'm running toward the chance to be someone who matters. Someone who can make a difference when it really counts. And what are you running from? The assumption that because I'm a country girl from a small town, I can't be anything more than that. I'm running from a life where my potential is limited by other people's expectations. Dr. Reeves made notes in her file. The psychological profile suggests that you're driven by a need to prove yourself. That can be a strength, but it can also be a vulnerability. What happens if you fail? Then, I fail, Sarah May said. But, at least I'll fail trying to be something extraordinary instead of succeeding at being ordinary. By the end of the second week, the candidate pool had been reduced from the original 26 to just 14. The remaining candidates were clearly exceptional in various ways, but Sarah May was beginning to realize that she was being evaluated on a different scale entirely. It became clear during a complex multi-day exercise that simulated a hostage rescue operation. The candidates were divided into two teams and given a scenario involving terrorist-held civilians in a mock urban environment. Sarah May found herself selected as team leader, a responsibility that both terrified and excited her. The exercise was designed to test everything they had learned: tactical planning, team coordination, stress management, and decision-making under pressure. Sarah May's team was tasked with planning and executing the rescue while the other team played the role of hostile forces. What the instructors didn't tell them was that the scenario was based on a real operation that had failed catastrophically 2 years earlier, resulting in the deaths of 3 hostages and 2 special operations soldiers. The deck was stacked against success, designed to see how the candidates would respond to an impossible situation. Sarah May spent hours studying the mock facility, analyzing the hostile force capabilities, and developing multiple contingency plans. She realized quickly that a conventional assault would likely result in civilian casualties, but she also recognized that her team lacked the specialized equipment and training that would normally be available for such an operation. Instead of trying to overcome these limitations through force, she developed an unconventional approach that relied on misdirection, psychological manipulation, and precise timing. Her plan involved creating multiple diversions to divide the hostile force's attention while a small element infiltrated the facility through an unexpected route. The execution was flawless. Her team successfully extracted all hostages without casualties while neutralizing the hostile forces with minimal collateral damage. What made the achievement even more impressive was that she had accomplished it using tactics that the instructors hadn't seen before, innovations that showed genuine creative thinking under pressure. Afterward, Instructor Walsh pulled her aside for a private conversation. "That was exceptional work, Henderson. The scenario you just completed was based on Operation Red Dawn, a real hostage rescue that failed in Yemen 2 years ago. Professional special operations teams with years of training and state-of-the-art equipment weren't able to accomplish what your team just did." Sarah May felt a surge of pride, but Walsh wasn't finished. "However, I want you to understand something. Success in this assessment program is just the beginning. If you're selected for advanced training, you'll be entering a world where the margin for error is essentially zero. You'll be asked to do things that will test not just your skills, but your soul. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah May looked the instructor in the eye. "I've been preparing for it my whole life, even when I didn't know what I was preparing for." That night, lying in her bunk and listening to the quiet breathing of her roommates, Sarah May reflected on how far she had come in just 2 weeks. The farm girl who had always been told she was the wrong twin was discovering capabilities she had never known she possessed. But she was also beginning to understand that this was just the beginning of a journey that would transform her in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The girl who left Tennessee was already gone, replaced by someone harder, smarter, and more dangerous than anyone back home would recognize. Tomorrow would begin the 3rd and final week of the assessment program. She had no idea what challenges lay ahead, but, for the first time in her life, she felt ready for anything.